I stood there frozen beside my father's casket, the only person who ever truly believed in me. As the mourners drifted away, I overheard my uncles talking, their laughter cutting through my grief like a knife. They were boasting about changing my father's will, calling me a disappointment, a failure. The betrayal piled onto my loss, as I realized my own family had conspired against both of us. Before I continue my story, let me know where you are watching from and hit like if you have ever felt betrayed by someone you thought you could trust. My relationship with my father, Thomas Wells, was complicated to say the least. He was a brilliant engineer with high expectations and a stern demeanor that often made me feel like I was walking on eggshells. My mother passed away when I was just 8 years old, leaving us to figure out life together, though we rarely seemed to be on the same page. Growing up as the only child in the Wells household meant carrying the full weight of my father's expectations. Thomas came from a long line of engineers and scientists who had built our family business from the ground up. Every dinner conversation revolved around physics, mathematics, or the latest technological advancements. While my father spoke passionately about circuit boards and structural integrity, I would secretly sketch designs in my notebook under the table. Art was my escape, my true passion. When I finally gathered the courage to tell my father that I wanted to study fine arts instead of engineering, the disappointment on his face haunted me for years. We had our biggest fight that night. He called my dreams impractical and my talents insufficient. I left home the next day to attend art school against his wishes. For years, our relationship consisted of short, tense phone calls on holidays and the occasional reluctant visit. What I did not know until much later was that, despite his disapproval, my father had been anonymously paying for my education and even purchased some of my artwork through third parties. He never told me, and I only discovered this after finding the receipts in his study after his death. 6 months ago, I received a call that changed everything. My father had stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The doctors gave him less than a year to live. Despite our differences, I moved back home immediately to care for him. Those final months together healed wounds that had festered for over a decade. As his body weakened, our connection strengthened. We talked more openly than we ever had before. He admitted his fear that I would struggle financially as an artist, explaining that his harshness came from a place of love and concern. I showed him my portfolio and the modest success I had achieved on my own terms. For the first time, I saw genuine pride in his eyes. One evening, as I was helping him into bed, he told me he had revised his will. The family business, the house, all his assets would come to me. I tried to brush it off, told him we had more time, but he insisted I needed to be prepared. He wanted to make sure I would be taken care of. Thomas also shared troubling stories about his younger brothers, William and Robert. They had always been jealous of his success, he said. They had attempted several times to take control of the company through underhanded means. My father had always managed to outmaneuver them, but he worried about what might happen after he was gone. The night before he passed, I made him a promise. I would protect his legacy and make him proud. I would find a way to blend my artistic vision with the family business he had built. He squeezed my hand weakly and told me he already was proud. It was the last conversation we ever had. The funeral was a somber affair held in the grand church, where my father had attended services his entire life, though he was never particularly religious. Dark suits, hushed voices, and the overwhelming scent of lilies filled the space. Despite the crowd, I felt completely alone. Several business associates and distant relatives approached to offer condolences, but their words felt hollow, rehearsed. My uncles William and Robert put on quite a performance. William dabbed at dry eyes with a handkerchief, while Robert placed a comforting hand on my shoulder that felt more like a weight than a support. They spoke eloquently about their beloved brother during the service, telling stories of childhood adventures and business triumphs that painted a picture of familial closeness I had never witnessed. One thing struck me as odd during the proceedings. Martin Jenkins, our family lawyer for over 30 years, was nowhere to be seen. When I asked William about it, he mentioned something vague about Martin being ill and unable to attend. It seemed plausible enough at the time, though a sense of unease began to settle in my stomach. After the service, as people began to disperse toward their cars for the procession to the cemetery, I stepped behind a large stone pillar to collect myself. I needed a moment alone before facing the burial. That was when I heard them. My uncles, thinking everyone had left, were speaking freely beside my father's casket. Their laughter hit me first jarring and inappropriate next to my father's body. Then came their words, each one cutting deeper than the last. "The fool has no idea we changed Dad's will last month," William said, his voice no longer thick with manufactured grief. "Everything goes to us instead of that disappointment." "Thomas was so weak at the end," Robert replied. "It was almost too easy to convince him that Donald would waste everything on his stupid art projects." They laughed again, the sound echoing in the nearly empty church. "Did you see him today? Looking all solemn and respectful. Wait until he finds out he is getting nothing but that old car Thomas loved so much." My hands clenched into fists as they continued describing how they had brought in their own lawyer, someone named Michael Graves, to draft the new will while my father was heavily medicated. How they had convinced him that I was squandering money, that I had gambling debts, that I was involved with drugs. All lies. "The company will be ours within the week," William was saying. "I already have buyers interested. 50 million at least," Robert added. "And the real estate holdings are worth twice that." They were planning to dismantle everything my father had built, everything he had worked for. Their words blurred as rage and shock washed over me. These were my father's brothers, my uncles, men who had attended my birthday parties and given me Christmas presents throughout my childhood. Now they were gleefully discussing how they had manipulated my dying father and stolen my inheritance. I wanted to confront them immediately, to step out from behind that pillar and expose their treachery to everyone. But something held me back. Perhaps it was the shock, or perhaps some deeper instinct for self-preservation. If they had gone to such lengths to deceive my father and steal his company, what else might they be capable of? So I remained silent, letting them leave, without knowing I had overheard everything. As I watched them walk away, still chuckling to themselves, a cold determination replaced my initial shock. I would not let them destroy my father's legacy. I would not let their lies stand. But first I needed to understand exactly what I was up against. After the burial, I drove home alone to the empty house that had once been filled with my father's presence. Now it felt cavernous, each room echoing with memories and unanswered questions. I had less than a week before the official reading of the will. Whatever I was going to do, I needed to act quickly. The next morning I called Jessica Parker, my father's executive assistant of 20 years. If anyone knew the inner workings of the Wells family business, it would be her. We met at a quiet cafe, several blocks from the company headquarters. "Donald, I'm so sorry about your father," she said, genuine grief in her eyes. "He was a good man, and he loved you very much." "Did you know about the new will?" I asked, getting straight to the point. Jessica's expression shifted. "What new will?" I explained what I had overheard at the funeral. With each detail, her face grew darker. "That cannot be right," she said firmly. "Your father was explicit about leaving everything to you. He made the changes months ago, long before he was on heavy medication. Then how could William and Robert have changed it?" Jessica leaned closer. "Your father was paranoid about industrial espionage. Did you know he recorded everything in his office? Every meeting, every phone call, every family discussion that took place there? This was news to me." Jessica explained that Thomas had installed a sophisticated recording system throughout his office suite after a competitor had stolen one of his designs years ago. The system was voice-activated and backed up to a secure server. If William and Robert pressured him to change his will and they did it in his office, there would be a recording, Jessica concluded. That afternoon I went to my father's office at the Wells Engineering headquarters. Using the keys he had left me, I accessed his private study. Sure enough, behind a false panel that Jessica had told me about, I found the recording equipment, along with instructions for accessing the backed-up files. The recordings were dated and organized meticulously. I found one from 3 weeks before my father's death, labeled William and Robert Will Discussion. With trembling hands I played it. The voices were crystal clear. my uncles speaking loudly and slowly, as if to someone hard of hearing or confused. My father's voice weak, but still present, asking questions, expressing doubts. "Donald does not deserve the company," William was saying. "He abandoned the family business for his art. He has gambling debts," Robert added, "a complete fabrication. He would sell everything within a year." My father's voice confused. "That does not sound like Donald. He has been here taking care of me." "Because he knows what is coming to him," William snapped. "But we have proof. Show him the photos, Robert." The recording continued, revealing how they had presented doctored evidence, played on my father's medication, induced confusion, and finally pressured him into signing a new document brought by a lawyer I had never heard of. I felt sick, listening to it, but also relieved. This was evidence of coercion, possibly even fraud. But would it be enough? Next, I checked the hidden safe in my father's home study, the one whose combination was my birthday and my mother's birthday combined. Inside, I found the original will properly notarized and witnessed, leaving everything to me as Jessica had said. There was also a sealed letter addressed to me in my father's handwriting, but I set it aside for the moment, focusing on the legal documents. I needed professional help. Through a college friend, I was introduced to Andrew Patterson, a lawyer who specialized in contested wills and estate fraud. After listening to the recording and examining the original will, Andrew was confident we had a strong case. "But we need more," he advised. "If your uncles went this far, they have probably been planning it for some time. We should look for evidence of other financial misconduct." Over the next few days, I threw myself into investigating my uncle's activities at the company. With Jessica's help, I gained access to financial records, meeting minutes, and internal communications. What we found was shocking. For years, William and Robert had been siphoning company funds into personal accounts, hiding losses, and making unauthorized deals with competitors. In my father's personal journal, which I found in another hidden compartment in his desk, he documented his growing suspicions about his brothers. He had been gathering evidence himself, planning to confront them and possibly remove them from the company. His illness had interrupted those plans. Andrew helped me compile everything into a comprehensive case against my uncles. We filed preliminary paperwork with the court, but decided to wait until the official will reading to reveal what we knew. The element of surprise would be crucial. The night before the reading, my phone exploded with notifications. 26 missed calls from various family members, including multiple from each of my uncles. Voice messages expressing sudden concern for my well-being, asking where I had been, why I had not been responding to their attempts to reach me. Text messages suggested we work things out as a family before the formal reading. Their sudden interest was telling. They must have realized something was amiss, perhaps noticed my investigations or Jessica's unusual activities. They were scrambling, trying to feel out what I knew. I did not return any of their calls. Let them wonder. Let them worry. Tomorrow, they would have their answer. The law office of Michael Graves was located in a sleek downtown building with floor-to-ceiling windows and minimalist decor. When I arrived, the conference room was already filled with family members. I rarely saw business associates of my uncles and even a couple of men in expensive suits who were introduced as potential investors. William and Robert sat at the head of the table looking confident, though I noticed the tight lines around their eyes, the slight dampness of William's brow. They had been trying to reach me desperately, and my silence had made them nervous. Donald William greeted me with false warmth. "We were worried about you. You have not been answering our calls." "I needed some time alone," I replied, simply taking a seat directly across from them. I had dressed casually, deliberately in jeans and one of my paint-spattered studio shirts. Let them think I was unprepared, unprofessional. Let them underestimate me one last time. Michael Graves entered, a thin man with a smile that never reached his eyes. He nodded to my uncles before taking his position at the head of the table. The reading began with the standard legal preamble, the identification of the deceased, the date of the document. I sat quietly as Graves read through the fraudulent will, watching my uncle's expressions shift from anxiety to smug satisfaction, as the document allocated the bulk of the estate to them, leaving me only my father's vintage Corvette, and a token sum of $20,000. When Graves finished reading, he asked if there were any questions. That was when I stood. Actually, I said calmly, I would like to present some evidence that this will is fraudulent and was obtained through coercion while my father was heavily medicated and not of sound mind. The room fell silent. William started to object, but I was already setting up my laptop, connecting it to the room's audio system. The recording of their conversation with my father filled the room, their own voices condemning them. I watched their faces drain of color as their scheme unraveled. Next, I presented the financial records, showing years of embezzlement and fraud. Jessica had joined us by then, providing her own testimony about the business practices she had witnessed. Andrew Patterson detailed the legal ramifications of what my uncles had done, explaining that this went beyond civil fraud into potential criminal charges. Finally, I produced the original will properly executed and notarized, along with statements from my father's doctors confirming his mental state had been significantly compromised by medication during the period when the new will was supposedly created. "You manipulated a dying man," I said, looking directly at my uncles. "You lied to him about me. You stole from his company for years. And you thought you would get away with it all. You were laughing at his funeral right next to his body." William attempted to bluster, claiming I had doctored the recordings, that I was trying to steal what rightfully belonged to them. But the evidence was overwhelming, and even their own lawyer looked uncomfortable now. "We have already filed a petition to invalidate the fraudulent will," Andrew announced, "and we have submitted evidence of financial crimes to the district attorney's office." The potential investors quietly excused themselves. Family members looked on in shock. Robert, always the more pragmatic of the two, seemed to deflate before our eyes, understanding that it was over. He was going to cut us out. William finally sputtered a last desperate justification. After all our years of work, he was going to give everything to you, an artist who knows nothing about running a company. He was going to remove you because you were stealing from him, I corrected. "And as for running the company, I may not be an engineer, but I know the difference between right and wrong. That already puts me ahead of both of you." The meeting dissolved into chaos after that. My uncles stormed out, their lawyer hurrying after them with a worried expression. The remaining family members approached me with mixed reactions, some apologetic, others clearly calculating how to stay in my good graces now that the power dynamics had shifted. Through it all, I felt a strange sense of calm. I had done what I promised my father. I had protected his legacy and stood up for myself in a way I never had before. As I left the law office that day, the weight of grief was still there, but alongside it was something new, a sense of purpose, a path forward. 6 months have passed since that day in the law office. The courts moved quickly to invalidate the fraudulent will and reinstate my father's true final wishes. I am now the majority owner of Wells Engineering, with full control of all my father's assets. I chose not to pursue criminal charges against William and Robert. The public exposure of their actions and the loss of their positions and reputations seemed punishment enough. I have not spoken to either of them since the will reading, though I occasionally hear rumors about their struggling attempts to start a new venture together. Some family ties, it seems, are meant to be severed. Running the company has been a steep learning curve, but not as impossible as my uncles predicted. I surrounded myself with skilled people who were loyal to my father, with Jessica becoming my chief of staff. Her institutional knowledge has been invaluable. I may not understand every technical aspect of our products, but I understand people, creativity, and vision. In fact, my background in art has brought a fresh perspective to the company. We have expanded into design-focused engineering, combining aesthetic beauty with technical precision. Our new line of consumer products has garnered attention for their unique appearance as well as their functionality. The company is thriving in ways even my father might not have imagined. 3 months after taking control, I found time to read the letter my father had left me in his safe. In it, he apologized for doubting my path and acknowledged that he had come to see the value in my artistic pursuits. He also warned me about his brothers, saying he suspected they might try something after he was gone. Even from beyond the grave, he was trying to protect me. To honor his memory, I established the Thomas Wells Foundation for Technical Arts, providing scholarships to students who want to blend engineering and artistic disciplines. The first class of Wells scholars will begin their studies next fall. I have found unexpected allies in this journey. Jessica has become almost family to me, her steadfast support reminding me that loyalty is not always bound by blood. The company employees, many of whom had worked with my father for decades, have embraced my leadership with enthusiasm and patience. Most surprisingly, I have found peace with my father's memory. For years, I defined myself in opposition to him, believing he never understood or accepted me. In truth, he was trying to protect me in the only way he knew how. His methods were flawed, his communication poor, but his intentions came from love. I wish we had reached this understanding while he was still alive. But I carry this knowledge with me now, a healing balm for old wounds. The betrayal of my uncles taught me a painful but necessary lesson about trust and vigilance. Yet I refuse to let it make me cynical. Instead, I choose to focus on building something meaningful, creating a legacy that honors my father while reflecting my own values. Life rarely follows the path we expect. Sometimes the deepest hurts lead us to unexpected strength. Sometimes the people we think we can trust betray us, while unlikely allies emerge from the shadows. What matters is not what happens to us, but how we choose to respond, how we rebuild, how we grow. Have you ever experienced a betrayal that ultimately led to something positive in your life? Share your story in the comments below. And if this tale of resilience resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories of overcoming life's challenges. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes our greatest strengths emerge from our deepest wounds.